Hello everyone and welcome. So this is a short tutorial video on the new environmental analysis commands that we've added to the Pollination Rhino plugin. And to get these commands on your end, you'll have to make sure that you have the latest Pollination Rhino plugin installed. And just to be clear, while these environmental analyses are very similar to what is run with the Ladybug Tools plugin for Grasshopper, these commands are completely independent of Grasshopper, and they are not installed as part of any of the Pollination Grasshopper or Ladybug Tools Grasshopper plugins. These are just Pollination Rhino commands that we've added here. But you'll recognize a lot of these commands that I've added, like Sunpath, Windrose, direct sun hours, radiation. These are all essentially the same exact studies that you'd be able to run with Ladybug, but in a much more user-friendly interface. So let's dive into how to actually use these commands. So at the very least, if you guys don't have this environmental analysis tab already popped up, if you've just opened up the latest plugin, it might look like this. You can always just snap it into your tab up here. Or if you don't see that at all, and you're certain that you have the latest Rhino plugin installed, you can always right-click on the toolbar here and say Show Toolbars. And if you scroll down, or actually, you might not even need to scroll down. Yeah, if you just simply, if you're in Rhino 8, if you go to this environmental analysis section and you just make sure you check this box, that'll pull up this little environmental analysis tab here. So that's how you get this tab. And diving into how exactly these commands work. So certainly you can type them from command line. Certainly I can just do something like PO Sunpath, would bring up a Sunpath. But I think it's a little bit nicer to use these buttons. So if you just click on this, you'll see practically all these commands are structured in the same way, where they will first ask you for an EPW file and give you a lot of options related to that specific command. And certainly I could go over to EPW map here, or any place where you'd like to download weather. And I know this little site that I have up here is for Boston, Massachusetts. So I'll just copy one of these, let's say one of these ones, to my clipboard. I can go back over to Rhino, and certainly I could paste this directly into the toolbar here, and that's all that I would need to get a Sunpath to pop up. But there's a slightly more recommended way that we point you towards in order for setting up these EPW files to use with these commands. And so I'm just going to escape out of this Sunpath command for a second and show you this other command that's called PO project information, or project info. And this brings up a little dialog here. And I should say, you can either access it with that command, or if you go to the Pollination Rhino tab here and you click on this little I next to the name of the model, you can always bring it up that way. And you'll see this allows you to specify EPW weather file URLs that you want to be used with this particular model that you're building here in the Rhino scene. So all that I'd have to do if I want to make this weather URL the default weather file that is used essentially for all studies and all simulations that I'd run with this 3DM Rhino file, I can just click this little plus button and then paste in that URL that I copied from EPW map, in this case for Boston Logan Airport. I can hit OK. And once I hit OK, you'll see that's going to set the project, the EPW file information for this Rhino document here. So the next time if I save this file and then I open it up again, it's still going to have a note of that weather file address stored in the 3DM so that it's usable for any of these commands. So just to show you how this works, right now if I hit PO Sunpath, you'll see, whereas before it was just empty asking for an EPW file path or URL, you can see that it actually has the EPW file set as the default already ready to go for this command in this case. So that's the way we'd recommend. If you set it in that project information dialog, you'll be able to use it for all these commands. And you can see there are other options here, but I'm going to leave them as they are for the time being and just hit enter. And you'll see this pulls up a Sunpath for the Boston weather file. It's asking me for a point to set the origin of the Sunpath. Certainly I could do that and move the Sunpath around like this. But you know, looking at this right now, I can see the sun is not really, this Sunpath isn't well scaled for my geometry. So I'm just going to hit escape. I'll hit that Sunpath command again. And we'll change the scale this time. The default scale is 1. Maybe we'll change it up to 3 or something like that. And I think all these other ones make sense, but you can see, right, you can control the scale of that Sunpath. You already seen that you can control the origin of it. So the general idea is that you can use the Sunpath essentially any time that you'd want to, let's say, illustrate to a client or a project manager something about this particular design. Like, let's say I want to show them that you're going to have to be worried about glare on this facade of this design if you know, so you may not want to do it all glass with manual blinds unless you want those blinds to be down all the time. You can do that simply by pulling up the Sunpath here whenever you want. Um, Now, of course, a lot of the times I'm going to leave the default origin here, right? You can see the last step a lot of these commands give you here is just an option if you want to add the geometry to the Rhino document. So a lot of these commands, you're not, you know, the intention is that you don't really need to add them to a Rhino document, right? It only takes a second to pull up the Sunpath like this. So you don't necessarily need to bake it into the document, but if you did want to, you can always click this little toggle to say add to doc yes. And then when you hit enter, that'll actually bake the Sunpath into the Rhino scene. And you can actually see it'll add it as geometry with different layers for the compass, the analemmas, the daily arcs, etc. All right, so all these commands you can bake the geometry if you want to do some extra post-processing on this geometry or customize things that we don't really allow you to do. But I'm just going to delete this right now. I kind of like, and just say yes to all, kind of like the fact that we can use these commands, you know, just as they are. You can see we have one for windrows, for example. You know, I can try this and hit enter, and that's all that it takes to pull up a windrows for the Boston Logan weather file. And assuming that people like these commands and they tell us that they're useful to have them in Rhino, we will add all of the Ladybug visualizations. If you guys want psychrometric chart, hourly plots, all those things can be added as commands like this. It's pretty straightforward for us to do this using the exact same methods as essentially what's under the hood of Ladybug. So that's the general idea here for those commands that produce climate graphics. Now you'll see we have a number of other commands here, like for direct sun hours, for radiation. We actually have a few different types of radiation, like radiation benefit, which I'll explain a little second, and radiation for clear skies or peak solar. And we have view roses and view studies, view percent studies, essentially, that you can run from commands. But just to give you a sense of how these commands work, right? So let's say I want to look at the, you know, the direct sun on this building massing here that I'm considering. I can just click this to run the command. It's already got the EPW file there ready to go. And you can see in the options here that you can essentially customize the month, the day, the hour, the start and end hours, the time step. A lot of those things that you'd normally customize in Ladybug using what we usually call an analysis period, those are essentially exposed through options on these commands. So if, let's say, I don't want to run it for the month of December, if I want to run it for all months, I could do that, or I could run it for, let's say, the equinox. Or, you know, let's do the solstice. I'll do in June here, June 21st, for the full start hour and end hour. And maybe I'll change the time step to something finer, like maybe 4 time steps per hour. And I'll leave these other things as they are right now, but you can see you can always customize things like the north, etc. But I'm just going to hit enter. And you'll see that it's going to show me the sun positions on that sun path that I already set up here. You can actually see it's pulling that origin from the last time I moved the windrows over to the side here. And in fact, if I wanted to get this a little more centered, all I'd have to do actually is just make sure I run the Sunpath command again here and set the origin to back to over here. So once I've done that, and I now go back to my direct sun hours command, right, you see it remembered my options from before, like June 21st. And you can see, yep, now it's showing me those positions on the sun path, right? This is just to show you whatever things you set up in that PO Sunpath command, those are also carried over into this PO direct sun hours command. So you can actually get a visualization of what sun positions you're running before you go and start simulating. So you can see here the next step of the process is to select surfaces, polysurfaces, or meshes on which direct sun is going to be studied. So in this case, this will just be my building massing here that I want to take a look at. So I'll just hit enter. And you'll see the next thing that the command will do is it's going to switch into wireframe mode and give me a visualization of the points, every single point that's going to be studied as a part of this direct sun hour study. And you can see the command is asking me for contact surfaces, polysurfaces, or meshes that block the sun. So in this case, I'm just going to select everything here and then hit enter. And you'll see you'll see it actually was running the direct sun calculation with 31 processors on my machine here. This was a pretty quick one because it just finished in a second and a half, but you can imagine, right, if you're running all suns over the entire year, it's going to take a few seconds. But you can see as soon as it's done, you get this nice direct sun hours visualization. You get a little legend here showing up. And just like all the other commands that I mentioned, you have this option here to add it to the document or not. In this case, I'll say yes, because I want to show you at least some features about this. So if I hit enter here, you guys will see the way that this result is baked into the scene here. It's actually a little bit more sophisticated than just a colored mesh. So I'm going to turn off my masking geometry here. And you can see, right, we have the mesh, but we also have the legend here, which is actually a legend that I can click and move around the scene. And if you double click this legend, you can customize all sorts of things about it. Like you can customize the upper and lower limits, the number of segments. I can change the colors here. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I like the shadow study. Let's see what that looks like. It's a little grayscale for me. Maybe I'll choose something like, the nuanced ladybug color scheme. I don't know. You get the picture essentially, right? And you can change the legend to be horizontal. You can change things like the decimal places. In this case, I don't really need 2 decimal places. I kind of like those Ecotech colors, so maybe I'll go back to those, right? So you can see all of the things that you'd customize with legend parameters. You can essentially do that once you've baked an analysis mesh like this. And when you're happy and satisfied, you can hit OK. And the next time that you save this document, if I just hit Control S, right, this mesh is saved into the scene here with all of the data, all those actual numerical results of direct sun, such that if I ever want to, come back to it and customize these legend parameters again, I'd be able to do so. And in the future, we'll probably add some extra commands for analytics on these meshes. Like if you just want to get the average number of hours over the whole mesh, or the total, maybe multiplied by the area, I'm sure we'll add lots of things in here so you guys can quickly pull off information like that. So that's generally how these types of analyses are run like this. And certainly I can go through and walk through radiation. I mean, you guys will see it's essentially the same setup as the direct sun hours, right? You have the month, day, hour, etc. Maybe I'll just show you, right, instead of a Sunpath, though, you're getting a sky dome visualization to show you exactly what the sky dome looks like before you do it. In fact, maybe let me just show you quickly here. Why don't I turn the masking back on? Because these radiation benefit studies were actually something that I know a lot of people really love to run, especially in early design. And the basic idea is that I just clicked on this PO Sky Dome benefit here. But the basic idea is, right, we're doing a radiation study, but we're using the temperatures in the EPW file and their relationship to a balanced temperature or kind of a neutral temperature to say, is this solar energy helpful winter sun or is this harmful summer sun that's going to raise our cooling load? And you can see, right, so you get a visualization of red and green, which is very, very clear for, is this a benefit to the building massing or something that's harming it? Right, so this is the general way that this type of study is run. And if I were to, I can set an origin certainly for this sky dome that's, I don't know. I mean, this is a pretty good origin, but maybe I should actually set the scale to be 3, much like I did with the Sunpath. Right, and we can see, yeah, now it's a little clearer to see in relation to our geometry. But if I were to run this radiation benefit, it's going to pull up that exact visualization of what's helpful winter versus harmful summer. I can select my geometry. It'll again show me those, that grid of points that it generated. I can select all the context geometry, and it will, in probably a second or two, run a full radiation benefit study and give me that nice, sweet colored mesh that is green with the parts that are essentially have more helpful winter sun than harmful summer sun, and red for the parts that are, more harmful summer sun or, setting sun probably in the west here. Than helpful sun, right? And so this is a good way to try and evaluate, is your building massing generally better than some other option? And you can see, right, the units here by default are, I guess in this case I've set it to watt hours, but these units are adjustable. Certainly I could bake this and start to play around with it, but if you guys do want to know how to change the units, they're all under this little, if you hit this little gear and then go to units, that'll pull up the Rhino plugins menu for all of your default unit settings. So if you don't like watt hours and instead you wanted to change it to, or watt hours per square meter, if you wanted to change it to kilowatt hours per square meter. So that's generally how the unit setting works. And then maybe just one last thing I'll show you is that we have, a command. If you guys don't necessarily want to go through the whole process of running a direct sun study just to get a sense of where the shadows are, we have this little command called the PO shadow study here. It works very similar to direct sun, right? You'll see it as a month, day, hour set of inputs. But right, if I didn't want to necessarily wait to run a whole study, I can just, let's do a good time step here, maybe something like 2. I could just run this command and you'll see that it automatically switches the Rhino view mode to be rendered. and it's going to use a series of Rhino light objects along with the Sunpath here to essentially show you a full-fledged shadow study, in this case on the summer solstice over this geometry here. Right, so this is, again, it's meant, the kind of role that these commands are meant to fill. Like, one, they're meant to fill a gap for people who don't know Grasshopper, who are not very familiar with it, and who, would benefit a lot from running these studies, and so we wanted to make it accessible to them. But the other real thing that I think that, I mean, at least if I were in practice, I know, especially in architecture practice, I was constantly finding myself in meetings with clients or project managers, and I needed to explain something to them quickly, and going to launch Grasshopper, drag and drop components on the canvas. It was just, it was, by the time I had finally gotten something useful to show them, right, a lot of people had lost interest. Right, so the beauty of these commands, right, you can see they each take like a second or two to set up. They're meant to be really immediate and give you immediate feedback. So again, please give us feedback about these commands on our Pollination Discourse forum. We'll be adding more of them, as I said, and if you guys tell us that you are making heavy use of them, we'll keep making them better and better. So thank you all for listening to this video, and I will see many of you on the forums.